Hi guys, it's Doc's Market Minute for Wednesday, January 13th. What we find is that when markets go into a corrective cycle, they go from periods of complacency where everybody's basically happy up here, and remember the whole bad news is good news cycle, where a bad jobs report actually is good news because it means the Fed stays off the gas for a while and everything remains happy, right? But once markets roll over and fall into a corrective pattern or bear cycle, it's a whole different ball game. And what happens that I found is that when we get into a mode like this, all of a sudden bad news really is bad news. And it tends to snowball. Like a little bit of bad news up here, all of a sudden snowballs into more and more bad news stories that get worse and worse the further down that we get. And right at the very bottom is where we get into what we call the capitulation phase, where people capitulate and they say, all right, I can't take it anymore. The pain is just too great. I'm going to fold my hand. And this is typically when the market runs out of sellers and starts to find buyers instead. So we may yet have to go through that phase as well too. And this chart that I have up here is what's called a gap chart. This is the S&P futures, but it's only showing the market time that's trading between 9:30 Eastern to 4:15 p.m. Eastern. So what it leaves behind is these gaps, such as the ones to the upside that we have, rather large gaps up here, as well as some rather large downside gaps that got started back here in late September, early October. Many times those become targets, especially when we fall into these periods of bad news avalanche. So this may be one of the final targets that the market needs to close down here, is to close this gap down here and retest the August or September lows. We don't know precisely where it's going to bottom out here. Back here in late September, I was expecting a full retest of the August lows, but it just never got that far. So we don't know how far down this is going to go. It could go anywhere, but right now the market is showing this gap squarely in its sights right now. And until we change around this type of price action where early gaps higher are being faded, just like today, yet again, we're going to have to watch for those late afternoon rallies to see whether the market can start to bounce from here. But right now, this is just nothing more than just a bear flag setting up for perhaps the next swing down that lines up with more avalanche of bad news and maybe final capitulation before we can start to see recovery into the end of January. So watch out for those targets. Watch for the gaps. That is it for today's Market Minute. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.